Weiler from Contemporary Education, an educational services company committed to transforming education to meet the challenges of the 21st century. This video is part of a larger series talking about how to design play-based projects. I define play-based projects as projects that are inquiry-based, they're interdisciplinary, and they're designed around an imaginary pretend play situation. Most often, those imaginary pretend play situations emulate real-life situations. And within the kind of methodology that I propose for play-based projects, it utilizes the contemporary education framework, which starts from human development needs, then the real-life situations that meet those needs, which are often, as I said, emulated in the imaginary pretend play situations, and then an awareness of practices for children to open up the possibilities for thought and action in those real-life situations emulated in play. And together with this awareness of practices, the theoretical inquiry that kind of sustains the different practices that people engage in, then deliberation of the theory and the practice for children to make more informed, intentional, and meaningful decisions in the imaginary pretend play situation, as well as in their real lives that they lead outside of the imaginary pretend play situation. So there are three main moments of a play-based project design: the sustained inquiry, where students will be engaged with educators in research and inquiry. The second is joint play, which is the anchor of the teaching and learning process. And the third are moments of reflective dialogue and guided feedback that kind of compare and contrast the moments of sustained inquiry, how we see different practices and how we see different theories at play in the real life situations emulated in pretend play, and how we're engaging and participating in the scenarios, props, scripts, and roles that we're taking on in our imaginary pretend play situation in joint play. This video is part of a larger series talking about play-based projects from the perspective of the organization of time, space, resources, and relationships. And this video will focus on the organization of relationships. So to start thinking about relationships, and this video will focus specifically on the relationship between educators and children in joint play and in the larger pretend play project design. It comes from a more Vygotskian cultural historical viewpoint of the teacher's role as a mediator of the teaching and learning process, as well as a more experienced learner within a community of learners. So when you take that into play, it means the teacher is both the mediator of the teaching and learning process in those moments of sustained inquiry and moments of guided feedback and reflective dialogue, being the questioner and bringing different resources as a more experienced learner. And also, very importantly, within the joint play situations amongst educators and children, the educator acts as the more experienced play partner. And this is very important, that within this conception of play-based project design, educators both act within the imaginary pretend play situation, taking on roles and acting as characters, as children's play partners, as well as roles outside of the imaginary pretend play situation, acting as observers of children's independent play, and as well as directors and narrators, helping to push the narrative forward and engage students in the teaching and learning objectives in a way that not imposes, but is acted as an initiative or a suggestion or an offer for children to build upon. So this involves many different positions, both inside and outside the imaginary pretend play situation. And when I say inside and outside the imaginary pretend play situation, I mean when the children and educators are in a role, in a character, and acting out in that role and character inside the imaginary pretend play situation versus being outside of the imaginary pretend play situation and acting as educator and acting as child, that they can take on different roles, like I said, as an observer, a director, or a narrator. A helpful idea to bring into the moments when educators and children are acting inside of the play-based situation is that their interactions could be understood as initiatives. So when it's the child's initiative, they act in a certain way. They make suggestions to build up the imaginary pretend play situation, that we can draw upon the language of improv theater and think of that initiative as an offer. And so within the imaginary pretend play situation, participants, be it educators and children, they are giving and receiving offers, and they're building up this whole script of the imaginary pretend play situation together. The idea of the offer is that it's something to present perhaps a problem, it could present a dilemma, a conflict, it could present a new role, it could present a new prop or a new aspect of the scenario, but always with this idea that on the educator's end, it's a way of infusing imaginary pretend play with different material and conceptual resources that come from the curriculum across disciplines. So it's an infusion of learning objectives, but in a way that it's making this offer, making this suggestion, and leaving it open-ended for children to be able to complete the action. So if it's presenting a problem, it leaves it open-ended for children to come up with different possibilities within their characters, within their roles, and also the educator making this offer from within the role and character that they're playing. Each new offer, it's like weaving a thread. So each new thread comes in and it's woven to create the tapestry. And you can think of this tapestry as the story, and the script of the story, the plot, that's what's being developed, and it's being infused with these teaching and learning objectives. So each author is like weaving in a new thread into the story, and this is a collective story that each new thread, it becomes part of this complex and intricate tapestry. And this collaborative story, like I said, it's the real life situation that's emulated in the imaginary pretend play situation. And so children need to mobilize the resources that they're learning through sustained inquiry in the joint play together with educators, and then educators help them to critically reflect on those moments of joint play, comparing and contrasting to the moments of inquiry and research in the real life situations, and this awareness of practice and this theoretical inquiry, so that they can deliberate upon it. So within pretend play, they're co-authoring these stories with educators, but then that's developing and building up their material and conceptual resources to use in decision making in the pretend play situation, but also their choices and decision making in the lives that they lead. So as they co-author stories and play, they're also learning how to be the authors of their own lives and develop their agency in their own lives, again, to make these more informed, intentional, and meaningful decisions that draw upon material and conceptual resources, this base of knowledge that comes from the curriculum in different subject areas and different disciplines, but always in connection to the real life situations that they face now and in the future, and how those are simulated, emulated in imaginary pretend play. Finally, you can see in this diagram, there are many different positions educators and children can take within imaginary pretend play and within a play-based project design. They can be inside of the imaginary pretend play situation as a character taking on a role, and they can take positions such as leading initiatives and leading this offer making within the pretend play situation, following, and so building upon the initiatives and the offers of others, and as well as balancing in terms of how they make offers and make these initiatives and leaving them open-ended so that they can be completed by the other, as well as outside of the imaginary pretend play situation, taking on roles as observer. And when in the role of observer, really being in the role like having a clipboard and taking notes. It can be drawn notes, it can be written notes by educator or by children. Sometimes even doing it jointly so that a child can learn how to observe and make observational notes together with the educator, as well as taking a director position outside of pretend play, as if it is a kind of film or theatrical production where the director can say cut or freeze and then give some kind of side direction or coaching. And finally, the child or the educator can also act outside of the imaginary pretend play situation as a narrator. So kind of that voice outside of what's happening, but that kind of gives a hint as to how to extend and lead and expand the pretend play situation. I recognize that this might be a different way of looking at play and play pedagogy and play-based project design. And so I welcome you to please explore further resources on my website at contemporaryeducation.com and follow me on Instagram and Facebook at Contemporary Education, as well as subscribe to this channel for further videos. And please leave a comment and engage in this dialogue about meeting the challenges of the 21st century by transforming education and thinking about how you can modify your practices as an educator to help empower your children to make more informed, intentional, and meaningful decisions in play and in the lives that they lead. Thank you so much for watching.